I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
Well, I'm sitting here. I'm looking at Dudley. I'm looking at Lanny, Toxie, Dr. Erick Larson, and we're like a bunch of y'all are like a bunch of children.
Hey,
We're
have you
looking
got
at
the
radar.
Have you got the hallelujah music?
Yeah.
There's some.
See if you can find that.
Potentially some rain coming.
We're getting
That's right. It is raining as we speak outside.
The electricity cut off a few minutes ago, so we may not even get through this. But
we might not even be recording. There it is.
That's it. That's it right there.
Man, we need it.
What are those 5 or 6 magic words we've been waiting to hear for 2 months? It's raining on the farm.
Yes.
How about that? Well, sitting on our guest couch is Dr. Erick Larson from Mississippi State.
In the house.
You've been here before.
Yeah.
We're excited to have you back.
Repeat guest. Hey, and remember that giant deer you killed?
I do remember. Look, he just yesterday got the letter. It made Boone and Crockett.
That was a specimen now.
Lanny, it grossed to. We should let you tell
Well, yeah,
us,
you
but
should let him talk about his deer instead
what
of you
did
talking
it gross
about it.
and what did it net, Doc?
The gross score was 202/8, and the net was 170 2/8.
Wow.
So that's Booner.
a quarter of an inch.
That's a Booner.
That's a booming Crockett right there.
Yeah. That's,
He's so green.
I
You
am
see how,
green
look
on
at
that
him.
one.
Is that gamekeeper green or jealousy
so
green?
I've always wanted to kill
I'm
a
gonna
deer
say
that
jealousy.
would net
Yeah.
Boone and Crockett.
He just said
Always,
it.
that is a really interesting number, that 170, because it's hard to achieve a
Oh,
net
Bobby, it's just
170.
a number.
It's a shame they deduct anything from him, but, I mean.
Let's don't even go down that rabbit
Yeah.
hole. We're gonna go. We're gonna go down enough of them as it is.
That's true.
Yeah.
Don't open that can of worms.
No.
That's true.
Yeah, we are. Well, I should point out that the Dr. Larson sitting here, and he looks a little uncomfortable, and he was recently in a four-wheeler accident. And what happened?
What happened?
Just basically, I was spraying brush, basically, and was trying to get a little closer to target area where I wanted to spray, and was easing along the side of a ditch. And the four-wheeler just, got a little too far into the ditch anyway and just tipped it over on its side. And obviously threw me off the four-wheeler and probably hit a tree pretty good across my ribs and so forth. Had a pretty good collision with that hard ground and broke some ribs, but thankful I wasn't hurt any worse.
Thank the Lord, yes.
Yeah.
So I bet with that spray rig, once it started tipping, the water probably helped push you on over. It
didn't have a whole lot of water in it, thankfully, but yeah, that, there was a whole lot more force than what I thought there was going to be.
Yeah.
There always is, and any kind of, I had last summer. I was backing up, and it was just a hard, probably a 4-foot straight down ditch bank on the edge of one of our sloughs there, where with a bar pit. But I was backing up a little bit and didn't, I just lost where I was. Next thing I know, it's going, and so I just dove as far as I could, and landed face down in a bunch of mucky mud. But away from where it flipped over.
Yeah.
Thank goodness it didn't flip over on
And
top of it. You just can't. Backing up, I just want to say that to everybody out there, please be so careful on a normal four-wheeler, even more than any other ATV, because I know so many people have such bad accidents. And even people have been killed on them. Yeah. So please be so. They're not for going crazy on, but I will tell you, the backing up is the most dangerous thing of all.
I have literally, in that same situation, slung my shoes off backing up, and surprised I'm not dead. So I'm a living.
It scared me
testament.
pretty good. I'll say that.
Yeah,
Well, you
it's
just
still scary.
get to working, and you're trying to make a deadline,
And you get in a
This
hurry.
is your
You
only
get in a
chance,
hurry, that's right.
Only chance to spray or whatever, and you hit some little erosion spot that wasn't there. So
Yeah.
So, Doc, were you in a hurry?
No, not at all. I mean, there was no speed involved with the four-wheeler accident whatsoever.
Were you just not paying attention, you think?
No, I mean, it was just one of those things I wanted to get a little bit more, and I was too
Exactly.
bullheaded to back
Yeah.
up and go around and, get in the clear and get on a safer spot anyway. That, I went into an area that needed to be sprayed, basically. And,
it's hard to see too.
Yes, I was going to say, not
Yeah.
being able to see where your wheels are.
But it was fairly rough, basically, and I got in there too far and thought I'd had it where I could move up a few feet more and just couldn't make it. So
Only advice I'd give is bail out the millisecond you realize, get away from the four-wheeler, because obviously the most risk is someone going way too fast. But other than that, like I was going really slow, he was going really slow.
Yeah.
Is the four-wheeler landing on you, which I'm sure that's that part of what broke ribs, or was just the collision with the ground?
It's just a collision with the
ground. So you bailed as far as you could get away from it, I'm sure, too.
Yeah.
Do the players still have that override on the reverse?
I think they do.
Yeah, that's a huge safety feature.
It is a great safety feature.
Don't hit that button unless you want your shoes slung off.
Yep.
I'd like to see whatever happened there.
I've got witnesses. Big Dave was there. He can tell you about it. Nursery Dave.
Ooh.
So today, what we hope to accomplish, and I'm sure we'll, as Toxie likes to say, we'll go down some rabbit holes, but
some cornholes.
Yeah.
Gar holes.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
Yeah.
So
He's
so
supposed to do the dad joke.
So quick.
we want to talk about growing corn, and specifically for wildlife. But what we'd like to do, ideally, is I'd like for you to be able to explain and teach our guys some tips and tricks and techniques that these big row crop farmers use to be able to apply in small application for wildlife. And I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, when I look around the room, growing corn probably is more intimidating to people than most any other crop we talk about.
I'm glad you used that word. You
yeah.
mentioned it earlier, and it intimidates a lot of us, me included.
Yeah. Do you hear that a lot?
I can see that, I guess, in some respects. Obviously, I'm working with farmers. That's what I do, as a professional, is to advise farmers and consultants and retailers how to improve their corn production systems, and also work with some other agronomic crops. So, they already know the business. They're just looking for an extra layer of expertise, I guess, that I help with and advise folks. So, obviously I know about the crop, trying to foresee, what questions you would get, or folks that are growing it for wildlife purposes may be dramatically different in some respects than what we deal with from a production agriculture standpoint. But obviously there's a lot of similarities, and knowing the basics of, what's going to make the crop respond, and what's the keys to make things successful are going to be the same.
Yeah, I think they'll learn, and I want to learn more, that you could probably save some of the money you're spending because you're just hearing lore and legend and not necessarily specific to what you need. And also you might be missing the real targeted things you need for your corn, So, yeah, I'm interested in that. I think a lot of the things he'll teach us, we can apply those same principles to other crops too, potentially,
Sure.
Because let me just ask this, from the broader scientific name or description, is corn actually a grass?
Yes.
Is that right? I thought it was. So there's millions of grasses, but that tells you a little bit about the similarities between that and just a wide number of crops that are very important to wildlife.
There goes Mac's trivia questions right out of the gate. So.
No, speaking of that, I was going to say, so it's a grain, a vegetable, and a fruit, technically, right? I mean, isn't that correct? Because it flowers and produces the fruit.
Don't put words in his mouth. Professor.
It depends.
Yep.
Is there any truth to that it's all three?
Well, from a agricultural standpoint, you think about it from being a grain crop. It's a very productive grass crop. It's a very large grass crop in terms of size. Its maturity is very long compared to most other crops. So there's certainly some unique characteristics about it, but it's you can eat the ears for as a vegetable, I guess, as well too. So there is a market for sweet corn. A lot of folks will pick field corn and put that up and put it in the freezer as well too. So, it can be used for a number of different purposes. But from a wildlife standpoint, primarily we're looking at the grain that's produced by the plant and the sheer volume of it and the quality compared to our other grass crops is far and away higher than most other crops. So it's a very high reward crop in terms of the amount and the quality of grain that it produces and the value to various animal species.
Yeah, and so the other thing was mentioned that it's intimidating. And so, for me, we've grown a lot of corn. So it's not, even then, it's not to me nearly as intimidating as some other ag crops that we would farm for wildlife. But what I do think is really intimidating to a lot of people and our listeners, and also just a dark spot that they don't understand, is growing non-GMO corn, non-farm corn, non-Roundup ready, for lack of a better word, corn, because there's a whole world out there of opportunity from a wildlife standpoint that, it scares people. And maybe it's a had more complicated, maybe not, but I love to go down. That's one rabbit hole I'd love to spend a little time talking about, is a little diversity of thinking and approach to corn as a crop, from a wildlife perspective.
Yeah.
Because we've sold some heirloom varieties that were really good, wildlife products before. But
old school
there's
varieties.
others. You would know more about, whether it be short corn. There's been several varieties touted or talked about or offered to us to sell before. The ears were low to the ground, like a mallard corn, and I forgot what the other one was.
I guess they're dwarf. They're dwarf species.
Well, this one wasn't necessarily dwarf, but it was just the ear was supposedly grew lower to the ground, so when you flooded your field, the ducks could get to it better, something like that.
But I would assume now, I guess we've been in Roundup Ready world for at least 20 years, huh? But a lot of listeners are probably thinking, gosh, it would be just easier to do an application of glyphosate over the top and be done. But there's tons of old school varieties out there that may taste a lot better to the deer. So that would be fun to discuss. Like, what are our herbicide options for the traditional varieties?
Yeah.
And things like that. So.
And to address that quickly, I guess, there's not a whole lot of difference between the conventional varieties and the Roundup Ready or the GMO hybrids. And I'll try to address the two significant things that would address. But 25 years ago, what we did grow in production agriculture was conventional corn. So the varieties are going to be the same. In terms of plant type, you would never know the difference generally between non-GMO and GMO corn. The two traits that GMO corn brings to the table, which add some benefits for growers, whether it be for wildlife growers or production ag growers, is Roundup provides the ability to apply a herbicide over the top that'll control just about anything. Otherwise, to achieve weed control, you would use what we call pre-emergence herbicides. That'd be atrazine. Atrazine is a broadleaf herbicide, and usually some pre-emergence grass product. And there's a number of them on the market, and they're sold under various brand names. Dual is one that is commonly used, but if you're growing conventional corn, you would basically put out a pre-emergence herbicide right after you plant, because once the weeds come up, you don't have any ability to control them, or it's much more difficult to control them, or you have to have specific herbicides that control only a specific weed. Roundup, again, remember, will control just about anything. Mm-hmm. And there's a few other products on the market now that you can mix with the Roundup that will provide you residual control, they'll provide you contact control about anything. So it just eases your ability to control all the weeds compared to the older conventional non-GMO corn. The other thing that the GMO may add to your arsenal in terms of benefits is insect control. The insects that they target are corn borers, but something that falls into the realm of that is earworms or armyworms as well. We are seeing some breaking, I guess, of activity against the earworms, but lots of times with wildlife food plantings, we're planting them later in the summer when the armyworm populations are likely to be much more severe, where they could defoliate your crop pretty quickly if you're not watching the crop, more than once a week and have the ability to control those insects. So they provide a very efficient way to control that insect, and that's why they're commonly employed in a lot of production agriculture fields.
And are you referring to BT?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that
BT trait?
Oh, that's just a trait, so it's not an actual application of a product.
No, it's a trait that comes with the seed.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of different types of BT. I don't want to get too technical into that. but it's basically offering some sort of specific insect control.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's probably pretty valuable.
Oh,
actually.
yeah, I would think with armyworm infestations for sure.
Hey guys, Dudley from Gamekeepers here. I want to tell you about the all-new Gunner Dog Bowl. It's designed for home and built for travel. It's customizable, leak-resistant, light on weight, solid on durability, and rust-proof. Like other Gunner products, they're made in Nashville and designed for everywhere.
This is Lanny at the Gamekeepers of Mossy Oak. I've been shooting Nosler bullets as long as I've been wearing Mossy Oak. Nosler ballistic tip ammunition is made for knocking deer down right where they stand. Nosler's famous ballistic tip bullet is the key. It has controlled expansion and bone-crushing punch to turn a whitetail's lights out. Bring home more deer this year with ballistic tip ammunition from Nosler. Buy now at nosler.com.
So would it surprise you to hear that someone say that deer preferred the taste of an old traditional ear of corn over a GMO Roundup or glyphosate resistant?
No, I mean,
I think he's. Are you referring to field corn versus field corn?
that's correct.
Right.
Yeah,
So then
everything is field corn.
So there wouldn't really be a difference. Now, if you were talking about some old heirloom variety,
Like some of the varieties we have in our wildlife sweet corn. Was it Johnny Red or something
Jimmy
like that?
Red.
Jimmy Red.
Yeah.
Would that potentially have more sugars and be more sweet than a traditional agricultural planting?
It could be. Getting back to the original question about whether some things could be, would it surprise me? No, it wouldn't surprise me. There's just not much evaluation of it. Folks like y'all are probably the ones doing the evaluation for specific things like that.
For us, it'd be anecdotal anyway. Yeah. Sure. So, the one thing I do remember, and it hadn't even crossed my mind, even thinking about this until now, we used to plant, and I'd gotten advice from other, like a lot older than me at the time, experienced wildlife managers, tropical corn, they called it. And you could plant it much later for some reason on into the summer, like even now. And I do remember we had good luck and even some small patches growing it. But it was a really, it was almost like you put super glue on the whole, cob. And it was so hard. I mean, you couldn't even, you can take your hands when corn's dried and kind of wring it out, You couldn't even do that. It was real waxy and hard. And I do remember it was harder for wildlife to get started trying to eat it because it's so hard to get out of there. So, it may be part of what they are attracted to is it's so hard to eat sometimes if it's so hard. I don't know if that's, that's something you wouldn't study necessarily as in your job. But
that's right.
That's a wildlife consideration, that particular corn. And I don't know why at the time they were saying it was something you could plant so much later and still get good seed, but it was like on into July you could plant it. I remember that.
Yeah, it's basically a type of field corn that was developed for use in Central America. Very long season, very heat tolerant. Right. Not a lot of big market in the United States, but there was some grown in the southern United States, and it sadly has really fallen off the market now as far as seed supply in the United States, as far as from the commercial seed companies anyway.
Just
but,
think
too much of a niche,
Yeah, and I do remember one of the benefits was in reverse of what made it a negative, that like the next spring there was likely a bunch I was still standing up in the field because it didn't, mold and rot and fall out on the ground quite so easily too. So it was just interesting to note that. So that's a big question for a lot of people is they think because of the advice we get is from our farm buddies that, if you don't get your corn in by May here in the South,
right.
You can't do it. And I remember one time talking to you and says, oh, no, that's not the case at all. And from what I think you said, even like today, early July, it's possible with the right variety. But I do remember you saying if you were planted that late, about half or less of, double your spacing was that advice. So if you're just going to grow for wildlife, if you would double your spacing and give them much more room and plant less seed, you'd have a much better chance of achieving those objectives if you weren't worried about your pure yield, which we wouldn't be.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting if you could expound on that a little bit.
Okay. Well, corn is a crop that's a long season crop. it is, in a production agriculture situation, you're going to plant it. It's very responsive to moderate temperatures and having adequate rainfall during its early reproductive stages. So starting at tasseling is basically halfway through its growing season, or 60 days in. So if you're planting April the 1st, by somewhere in early June, normally most of the field corn grown in the South is reaching tasseling and is going through those early reproductive stages. And it's generally going to be fairly moderate temperatures that time. We're not getting into the heat of the drought like we are now, or not like July and August for sure. So the corn is going to be much more consistent and much more productive when it's planted early. So if you are planting it late, then it's going to produce the same size stalk, have the same water requirements and the same nutrient requirements and everything. So if you're planting it more during a more stressful time period, then you would want to back down on the number of plants, where you're no longer, you're basically trying to manage your water more so during the summer, trying to reduce and mitigate your stress level so that you're not overextending that plant and producing a dramatic failure situation.
Right.
So
from
it's
the
just
high
like a carrying
populations.
capacity of some deer, but instead it's roots in the ground. You have too many individuals drinking water out of the ground, it's going to go away the quickest.
Too many straws in the cup.
Yeah. And
good
it doesn't matter whether you're at in the United States, it's going to get dry during July and August. So
And hot, no
Yeah.
question.
all that is very stressful on a corn plant, as well as any other agricultural plant. Remember, a corn plant's going to be way taller and have a lot more grain producing potential than other plants. So that is going to require more water and more nutrients and more resources than what a lot of your other alternative crop plants that you might plant as well. So that's part of what makes it intimidating, obviously.
Well, so let me ask this. Let's kind of do this sequentially if we could. I'd love to learn when a guy needs to plant and what equipment is needed. Let's make sure we cover that.
Okay. Well, it's a 120-day crop, basically. Obviously, you would like to plant it relatively early in the spring. The guidelines that growers utilize is we need to have a soil temperature of at least 50 degrees, minimum soil temperature. So measuring that in the morning, early in the morning. If you don't have a soil thermometer, look at the nighttime temperature. When nighttime temperature stabilizes above 50 degrees, that's when growers are going to want to go to the field and start planting. And in the South, that's going to be mid to late March generally. And as you go further north, that date's going to back up a little bit. But generally, most of the time, an agricultural producer will want to plant it within 4 weeks of whenever that earliest time period where it reaches that temperature regime will be. Not that you can't plant it later, as long as you have enough growing season to mature that crop before the first frost comes and basically kills the plants prematurely. And most corn, whether it's grown anywhere in the United States, is going to have some sort of a day listing on the bag of how many days it takes for it to grow from emergence or planting until physiological maturity. So in the South, we typically grow hybrids that are 110 to 120 day maturity. And as you go further north, that number is going to be reduced dramatically depending upon where you're at in the United States. But the Corn Belt region, they're going to grow hybrids that are 105 to 115 days. Once you get above that, in the Minnesota and the very northern states in the United States, then it's going to drop off dramatically because their growing season is a lot shorter. But in the South, we can plant a full season corn up until mid-June and have enough heat units to get it mature going into the fall. It's just going to be growing during a much more stressful time period than what we typically would be familiar with from a production standpoint.
So, for example, this summer, that we've had a really dry June and July here. We would have been better off planting when all the farmers were planting versus
For sure.
Waiting until June.
Absolutely. And the historical averages, just the laws of summer and the generally increasing temperatures and the increasing infrequency of rainfall as you get later in the summer play out in those averages.
Got it.
So do I have to have some kind of corn planter to do this? Does corn have to be planted in rows?
Well, I'll put it this way, I guess. Corn is very responsive to the number of plants out there in the field, what we call the plant population or the plant density. We're extremely specific with the number of plants that we would have or what our recommendations would be. So in order to achieve that specific number, as opposed to a more rudimentary seeding method like broadcasting or something like that we would do with small grains or, a number of other species, it's fairly essential to use a planter so that you can achieve, 90%. You want to achieve where you get 90% of your seed to emerge and produce a plant. And the number to keep in mind is that farmers generally grow somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30 to 35,000 seeds per acre. An acre is 43,560 square feet, so less than one plant per square foot. In a wildlife food plot situation, you could probably reduce that to only one plant in every 2 square feet. Mm-hmm. So in order to achieve that, it's fairly critical to have some, a row crop planter of some type. It doesn't matter whether it's a 2-row or a 1-row. You can buy hand push units at, a good retail ag supply dealer, or an old planter or try to work out a deal with a farmer where, you can use their equipment or get them to plant your crop for you. It would be my best recommendation.
Yeah, no, that was a
And
good explanation.
Real quick, blatant plug for the Ferminator. You can actually tape the holes up and create rows big enough to come back and spray. The key to that is, as you have tell us all, corn can be planted a good bit deeper than beans and other stuff, and still, So my only point about the Ferminator, you want to be sure that you've created a firm seed bed behind that and gotten it fairly deep. So you might want to run back over with a cultipacker. Even though it has one, you might want to run back over it again with a cultipacker. But I have done that with both grain, sorghum, and corn. Take those holes up and
to create more spacing.
Yeah, it's more random, but it's still in rows.
Right.
So, and it worked.
Yeah.
Well, Facebook Marketplace, I see corn planters all the time, and I just wondered. They look really. Some of them are really old, but I suppose you can get the right plates and get somebody like Pat Epling that knows how to rebuild this stuff.
There are people doing that. They're taking old, kind of almost antiquated planters, like it might be a 16-row planter. They're cutting them down. The big thing for wildlife people is a 4-row planter. And it's so versatile and getting out of places still do a pretty big area. And so they're just kind of rebuilding as they're good welders and pieces and parts and plates and whatever farm. Actually, Greg has a friend of his does that too. But there's quite a few do that, and you can find them for sale. Mm-hmm. But they take there's one out here Clay put together. And took some pieces off of one that I had that really wasn't salvageable, and he's got one good one out of it that's right out here. Anybody needs to use it, we've got it. But 4 rows is a good one, but people rebuild them all the time from the ones that are so old they don't use anymore, and they work great. Mm-hmm. You can plant sunflowers and anything with them.
But it sounds like, based on Erick's description, the use of some type of planter is going to make your odds much better because you're putting all of those seeds at the exact same depth. They have a very similar spacing between the plants and between the rows.
And it's a very low spacing overall compared to other crops.
Right. And so when you're broadcasting, first, it's not going to be nearly as precise. I will argue that you can get a really good stand doing that. It's just that it's hard to describe how to do it or to execute it. You may disc a field and it be a lot fluffier than your neighbor discs his up. And, by the time it rains, one field's corn may be 3 inches deep, the other one, so it's not nearly as precise.
No.
So
What's the ideal depth you want to see corn?
You want to see corn seed generally planted at least 1.5 inches deep. It can be planted deeper. That's basically dictated by moisture. The drier it is, the deeper you can plant. And I don't recommend planting, deeper unless you have a shortage of moisture, which is generally going to be areas, considerably further west, in the drier regions of the country, basically.
For wildlife planting, it might make more sense to go deep if we're planting in.
Wouldn't soil type have a little bit to do with that too? Whether it's really hard clay like ours or a little sandier, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it basically comes back to moisture, I guess, and time of year that you're planting. Right. Generally, the sands will dry out a little bit quicker. Clays will hold more water. They'll provide more resistance, I guess, to the seed or to the shoot as it emerges. So generally, you'd plant them a little bit on the shallower side. But, 1.5 inches to 2 inches deep, maybe 2.25 inches deep would be perfectly normal across just about any situation in the South. And regions of the country that get considerably less rainfall, then they often will plant, deeper than 2 inches as a normal rule. But, the seed, you want everything to emerge at the same time if possible. So again, getting back to, your rudimentary methods, disking it in or something like that, where some seed is going to be 1/2 inch deep, some seed is going to be perfect depth, some seed might be 3.5 inches deep. That's going to provide a lot more variability, and the plants aren't going to be as responsive as if they're all coming up at the same time and they're spaced out at relatively evenly, and you have, what I would call a reasonable plant population seeding rate used. Everything that you buy in terms of corn seed generally has a certain number of seeds per bag. We seed it to a specific recommended rate, and we expect nearly everything to come up, and that's where the whether it's a modern or an improved or a renovated old planter, most any mechanical planter was designed to achieve that. It doesn't matter whether it's something built in the 1950s or it's the most modern thing that you can buy.
What about nitrogen? I think that's where some of this intimidation comes in. Is how does a guy knife in nitrogen and how much? And help us understand that.
Well, corn is a grass crop that requires nitrogen fertilizer in order to optimize its productivity. And being a large plant, it'll use a lot of nitrogen during the season. The other thing is that nitrogen, unlike most nutrients, is subject to losses, particularly from rainfall and moisture during the growing season, which makes it very difficult to manage in the high rainfall regions like the southern United States, or in the Corn Belt for that matter. It's not going to rain quite as much up there normally, but we'll do certain things to improve the efficiency of that very important nutrient, and frankly, one of the highest inputs that a grower will utilize to optimize their crop during the season. So there's several different nitrogen sources available. Bobby mentioned liquid nitrogen and knifing that in. The reason why you knife in some types of nitrogen fertilizer is because if you surface apply a urea-based nitrogen source, when you have evaporation of moisture off the soil surface, that nitrogen fertilizer basically vaporizes in the environment and is lost. So by knifing in that liquid nitrogen into the soil, it reduces that potential risk of loss associated with that type of nitrogen fertilizer. Mm-hmm. Now, urea is also sold as a granular source and is used in a lot of areas in the South. It's not used in the areas that don't get much rainfall because it requires rainfall or mechanical cultivation in order to incorporate it into the soil. So timing is very important for that nutrient, and as well as the application method. Think about what the way conditions are during the early part of the summer, after the corn emerges in April and May. We're still in the time period of the year where it rains every week generally. So applying any nitrogen source on top of the ground, particularly the granular sources, is going to be very effective that time of the year. As the corn gets larger, obviously it gets much more difficult to get a spreader through the field. It also gets more difficult to incorporate that nitrogen because the frequency of rainfall is starting to get much more infrequent as we get later in May as well. And remember, again, nitrogen is potentially being lost during the growing season due to wet growing conditions too. So we recommend putting out part of your nitrogen during the early part of the season, coming back and putting out most of your nitrogen when the crop is just fixing to go through its rapid growth stages.
How tall is that?
About a foot tall is when it enters its rapid growth stages. It generally takes about a month for it to emerge and grow to a foot tall. And again, if you're planting later, that time period will be less than that. But when it gets a foot tall, it grows very quickly up till tassel time frame, and that's when most of the nitrogen fertilizer use occurs during the growing season. So putting out most of your nitrogen, not at planting, but some of it needs to go out shortly after emergence, and then putting out the bulk of it just before those rapid growth stages is the key recommendation I would give as far as seasonal availability and efficiency of that high dollar input in growing a corn crop.
So if you're not knifing in liquid nitrogen, would you be broadcasting a granular urea over the top?
Yeah, and urea, there are some areas of the United States where you can either get ammonium nitrate, ammonium sulfate, and some other ammonium-based granular nitrogen fertilizers. Those are not subject to surface volatility like urea. So those sources are much more stable where you don't need a rainfall to incorporate them quite as quickly.
Right, so it would be meaningful to, ideally you would maybe at least have 2 applications, but the initial application, like at planting, you would want to incorporate that, sounds like.
You don't need to, I guess, if it's going to rain
Okay.
quickly.
Because I do remember Brad, who manages Waverly. He's a grass guy, and he's one of the best in the world. But it's just grass. He would always say, for far as your yard, he was like, yes, wait. And he just called it nitrate. He said, wait till you see the rain coming, ideally. I mean, you want it to start raining when you make the last pass. I mean, he was talking about just not leaving it out there for days and days without a rain. You know?
Absolutely.
Waste a lot of money too.
Yeah, probably.
So it doesn't hurt that when you've got a plant and you broadcast this nitrogen and some of it goes drips down into the plant, it doesn't burn it or anything? I guess not.
No, it does, I guess. You know, that's one of the things that most farmers would be very familiar with. But the granular sources will burn leaf tissue. Had a question about that last week from somebody that was growing some sweet corn. You want to moderate the total amount that you apply in any one application. General guideline is to not apply more than about 200 pounds of fertilizer per acre on corn that's taller than about 3 feet. As you get taller, that corn gets a lot more leaf tissue coming out of the top. Those leaves form what is essentially, they call it a whorl, but it's basically a funnel effect.
Yeah.
So when you're spreading nitrogen granular fertilizer over the top of it,
It can
and
get
you're
stuck
using,
in those little
you're using a
crevices.
pretty significant rate, it basically hits all those leaves and funnels in there and then can burn the leaf tissue pretty substantially.
And then the longer before a rain, the longer it sits there and burns it up too. Yeah, but I guess either way, I'd never realized that part of it.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah.
So-
The other thing is if you apply it in the morning when the leaves are wet and it has a dew on it, it'll catch more fertilizer, get more dust on the plants, and cause more burn as well. So it's a combination of rate relative to the age of the corn, as well as trying to apply it when there's not a heavy dew on the plants.
A
So,
lot to it.
Oh yeah.
we got our seed in the ground. We've already talked a little bit about nitrogen. I'm assuming we're going to get a soil test, lime, put out our P and K as needed, disc that in before we plant sometime, right?
Yeah.
And then, so what is a rule of thumb on how much fertilizer to put out? So just say you have access to 4600, which is urea. Like, what would you put out? Like 3 bags an acre on planting day, and then come back. When you said they're at that roughly 1 foot height.
The guideline, what again, going back to producers' corn or field corn, generally you would apply somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 pounds, maybe even more pounds of nitrogen over the course of the season to a producer field. You can probably lighten those rates by at least probably 25 to 50% in a wildlife food plot situation, particularly if you're planting late, where the yield potential is only going to be 50% of what it would be in a production field. The rates, the general rate of nitrogen fertilizer would be probably 100 to maybe as much as 200 pounds per acre over the course of the entire season, with about 20 to 25% of that going out immediately after planting, and then the rest of it, 75% basically going out at the beginning of those rapid growth stages when the corn is about a foot tall. And again, getting back to the leaf burn situation, if the corn is only a foot tall, it's not going to sustain near as much significant leaf burn than corn that is 3 or 4 feet tall. That's going to have a lot more leaf tissue, a lot bigger funnel effect up there at the top that'll collect all that granular fertilizer. One thing you don't want to do is apply that liquid nitrogen fertilizer over the top. Bobby mentioned that earlier, I guess. And normally you knife that in, and that takes another specialized piece of equipment that most wildlife food plot folks generally aren't going to have, I guess. Mm-hmm. But don't load up liquid nitrogen fertilizer in a sprayer and spray it over the top of your emerged corn crop, or you will be fairly disappointed because it will burn the leaf tissue.
Right.
Basically, it'll kill everything that it touches if the rate is high enough. But fortunately, the growing point of corn is usually underground, so it can actually recover from that. It may not be a total loss, but that's not something that is a normal recommended practice, is to apply any liquid fertilizer over the top or broadcast over emerged corn.
Okay, and I'm assuming, I don't want any of our listeners to get confused. That's different than like a foliar fertilizer, where somebody would just, put some sulfur, nitrogen, whatever out via foliar. But you're talking about bulk liquid nitrogen that you're supposed to put into the ground next to the root system.
Or dribble on the soil surface.
Yeah. So.
One other thing to clarify, you talked about, it's not ideal to just kind of broadcast and totally understood. And, a lot of people could get some equipment to, even if some one row planter works behind a four-wheeler to do it. But it sounds like to me it would be even more important to be sure to use a good pre-emerge for both the broadleafs and especially the grasses if you're going to go broadcast. So, I think what we're saying is we probably don't recommend somebody just disc something up, throw corn out, and disc it in, unless you're in some kind of specialized place I don't know about that doesn't have many weeds. Because you're either going to have to go back and destroy a lot of the plants to apply anything, or, have a terrible situation for them to not grow much at all from the competition, one of the two. So I just want to add that I don't think if somebody, because Dudley, we've tried to teach people how to do things with very little because we want everybody to participate. Mm-hmm. And so, this guy may have just bought some of our heirloom type corn, just slung it out, disc it in, and hope that, that's the one guy I'm talking to out there. Be sure at least it wouldn't take much to get some, a good pre-emerge for that type of situation, because if it's going to be by far your best chance to make that situation work. And probably incorporate your somewhat nitrogen right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation. Redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility. with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done, making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
Moultrie was first in feeders since 1979 and is the leader in total game management. They're taking feeding to another level with the new Ranch Series line of durable and versatile feeders, perfect for both wildlife and domestic livestock. So Dudley, you can feed your goats. Whether you're a deer hunter, a hobby farmer, a land manager, or a rancher, Moultrie has you covered with several kit options, including a rotating auger, broadcast, or a gravity kit. And these feeders are 300 or 450 pounds. They're big feeders. All right, so guys, Moultrie is offering our listeners a 15% site-wide discount at MoultrieFeeders.com. Use code Mossy Oak with a capital M, Mossy Oak, at MoultrieFeeders.com and get that 15% discount. So, Doc, in areas where there's a lot of deer and probably a lot of raccoons as well, at some point in when your corn's making, there you need to protect it some kind of way. And we're starting to learn a lot about electricity and do electric fences. I think folks at Gallagher make a great one. But is there like a stage in your mind that you can help share with us when guys need to be concerned about that? How many days in would you say?
For the species you talked about, coons will basically work on it during roasting year stage. So about 20 days after tasseling is when that occurs. It's going to be a fairly brief period. Deer is going to be late in the season. Y'all didn't mention wild hogs, which is probably the number one issue.
What are you thinking?
I try not to mention them or think about them, honestly. Now we've ruined my day. We're joyous about the rain. Now we brought it back down.
I have to say, I am impressed, though, that you said coons and not raccoons.
Well, he's been working down here for a while now.
Absolutely.
We converted him.
So 20 days after tasseling on the raccoons.
Yeah.
The pigs are probably just at any point.
Any point. And it never surprises me, I guess, but you're going out there and seeding a third of a 50-pound bag of seed at planting time. Every year in different areas of the South, anywhere there's wild hogs, they'll go in and totally annihilate the entire field overnight, basically.
It's unbelievable. I've told my story. Yeah. I think I've told it on air. 50-acre field, 30-inch rows. I mean, would you say population is 25, 30,000 seed per acre or something like that? Do the math on 50 acres worth, and before it can even germinate, it's all gone. I mean, literally, it might be 4 plants per acre left or something. And they figure out, because of their unbelievable noses, those rows, and I actually looked out there once or twice and caught them doing it, tried to shoot as many as I could, but they were fanned out in rows, just like a...
Literally plowing down each individual row with their nose.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, if you don't go look close from a distance, you won't even know they did it, because they don't go just randomly root.
You see those straight lines everywhere.
It's just a little straight line, just almost, unless you walk. If they do that to your rows and it rains right behind it, you really almost won't know, because it'll fill right back in.
Are you seeing a lot of that?
Yeah, there's areas of the state that have enough wild hogs where that's a legitimate concern. Folks lose their corn crop every year. There's big farms that have literally electric fences around considerable acreage to try to limit the hogs during that early part of the season and other predation over the course of the season. But wild hogs can get at any time during the year. It's probably going to generally be early. Deer, we worked with Mississippi Department of Wildlife and Parks and helped them with, some of the regulatory things they do with deer predation during the year. But there is some predation that will occur on this medium-sized vegetative stage corn. Obviously, there's the ears form late in the year, as it reaches maturity, they will start feeding on it again then as well. But there's different predators that'll work on it throughout the growing season.
The state our wildlife is in, I gave up. So, I mean, I would suggest anybody having a big problem with the hogs, this is wildlife farming stuff, call Gallagher, go to the website. I mean, electric fence. One thing I'll say, there's so many hogs are so smart, and they think around what you do. I mean, the traffic, but they do not like an electric fence. at all.
And the good thing about corn is that you're really growing it for that grain crop that's going to be available all fall and winter. So, contrary to soybeans, you're not necessarily, you don't want to necessarily keep deer out of soybeans all summer. You want them to eat them.
Yeah, that's the point. Yep.
So that's the beauty of corn. You're growing for that fall and winter payoff.
But I can't get it there anymore. I mean, it just seems to me the hogs get it upon planting, just like you said. It's terrible.
That's why you need the fence.
And then the deer are worse in the interim stage. They will eat short corn plants that are 6 inches tall in a dry summer. And then as soon as it makes that little milk ear thing, before it's even made the whole ear, but it's something tender, and I guess all that moisture's in it.
Yeah.
They'll go through and strip out. I mean, I've seen, for us, a big field, 30-something, all of that. Y'all know where North Bowman is.
Oh, yeah.
Wipe the whole thing out before it even made one full ear, just deer. And then, of course, God forbid you actually make a decent crop. That's when the hogs descend on you again when it fully matures. And they'll go to one other thing. They'll go to the middle of your field and start there and work their way back out. You almost won't know. I don't know why they're so smart to do it, but I've seen it. Have you seen that too?
Yeah.
They'll go out to the middle, and you won't even see unless you look for the trail.
Yeah.
You won't know they're doing it, and they'll start making the
flying circles.
the flying sausage thing out in your corn.
The pig corn
I
circles.
bet you 5 or 6 times we've had them really destroy a lot of corn. They went out in the middle and then started working their way back out.
And by the time you saw them on the edge, it's over with.
They'd already destroyed a bunch of them. Yep.
Yeah.
So here's what I know. Toxie has used the big pig traps and has caught a bunch of pigs through the years. And we need to get that started back again.
It's the only
sounds
hope
like.
besides electric fence.
But now with with these Gallagher electric fences, maybe there's some hope.
Oh, there is.
Yep.
Can you get enough voltage in it that'll just...
We're gonna let you test it out once we get it set
Fry
up.
like bacon.
Yeah, I want to see some sizzle out there, baby.
You know what I did? I'll say this as opposed to just giving up if it's really important to you. Maybe, cut back on the number of acres, do what's really important to you, and spend some more to be sure you get a crop. So, trap as much as you can with the trap. Do it right from chemical applications and fertilizer and everything else, and then use an electric fence or something. Maybe some people go to the expense of. What's so great about the electric fence? It's reusable and it's flexible, and you can use it year after year after year. Maybe move to a different place.
Yeah.
I've even to grow cheapers. We've had to do it years ago. Just build a hog wire fence around something. So
we knew a guy. I heard
but it
of
was
this
worth
guy.
it. I say that it was worth every bit of doing it. That we can grow inside of that now.
And I think we heard of this. There was a guy around town that was going to all the barber shops and picking up.
That would have been me.
Oh, that's you? Yeah.
It
works.
does work. They don't like.
Right.
I'll just say they. That's another thing they do not like at all.
You can't find a scrap of human hair around West Point. Toxie's got bags of it.
Yep. And it does. I mean, they'll either overcome it over time or it'll wash on out. But at first, it'll really move them out of. They spook worse from human odor than anything I've experienced.
Interesting.
So, Doc, if you go to the farm store and buy a big bag of corn, with these 50-pound, 40-pound bags of corn, it's pretty expensive. So, I'm just curious, what would happen if I took a bag of deer corn and put it in a planter and ran it out there? What would happen?
You would grow some corn plants, but they're going to revert to the genetic parents that were included in that hybrid. And all corn is all normal agricultural corn is what we call hybrid corn. It's a cross between a female and a male component. So when you plant that seed, it's going to revert to about 25% each of the two male and female components, and then part of it is going to be what you would call normal corn. But there's such an outcrossing of plant types that we don't even consider that to be a normal agriculture or a feasible, practical agricultural practice.
So in that field of corn, there are male plants out there that won't have a ear of corn on them?
Well, no, not in a normal field. That is hybrid corn that was produced from a male and a female, where during the production of that seed, they went in there and literally cut the tassels off, or the male part off of the female plants, and then they plant the male component in the rows beside that, and the wind carries the pollen from the male component over onto the silks or the ears of the female component. And then they harvest the seed from that cross the previous year, and then that's what's put in the bag and a grower would plant in his cornfield the next year.
That sounds like a lot of work for
That's
somebody.
some seriously complicated, yeah.
So that's why that corn's so expensive.
Yeah, but,
That's exactly right.
But think of what corn does. I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent, what it means to the backbone of our economy.
Oh,
now,
it's
too.
huge.
Yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately, I guess.
Is it the number one acreage of any crop in America? What's the number between corn, bean, cotton? I guess that's the big three.
Yeah, corn and wheat would be the highest anyway. Corn is the number one crop in terms of number of bushels of grain produced by far, though. Yeah. But wheat in the United States is going to be high acreage crop as well. Soybeans is going to be up there as well, and then any of the regional crops like cotton is going to be down the list fairly far. But
how about that?
Well, you think about wildlife though. Wildlife love corn, and
deer like that corn. That's for sure.
It's gosh, I mean, people have been throwing out corn as long as I can remember.
So yeah, but the one thing about it, Bobby, what we talked about, it is a food source and attractant, all those things for your. I guess at the least you could. I mean, someone harvests some, then they shoot doves over it some years. But from say September on, it's not. Like for deer, people think about deer growing corn for deer. It's not going to do anything much for their antlers per se. Although what I was, and which led me to, since it doesn't grow, the green soybeans, the bean itself doesn't do that either, even though it's packed with protein. It's the green leaves of soybeans that probably do more to put horns on deer in most of these big deer Midwestern states than anything out there. But let's talk just for a second about what corn does have in it nutritionally, because, I've always been told it's just candy and there's really not much good for wildlife in there. But I started looking up preparation. That's not true. And there are quite a few essential nutrients and things that they get from corn. And I guess that maybe it varies. I don't know if it varies from different species or not. And I was also going to let you have the floor about that and ask about high lysine corn, which I know has been talked about for a long time. And is that even something worse? Because I do know that lysine is a essential amino acid that we do not produce and neither do animals. So we have to get it from other sources. And there had been developed high lysine corns at one time. Where is that today?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be the best person to address that from a lysine standpoint. Obviously the corn is a high carbohydrate crop, and that's where you're getting a lot of value there. The protein percent is going to be around, somewhere between 6 and 8% generally, maybe 9% on some high protein corn. So there's obviously, higher value crops and other sources that of feed to get protein and other things from, I guess. And that's getting beyond, I guess, my area of expertise in terms of nutritional value of the crop as well. But that gives you a little bit of an overview of what corn brings to the table. It's going to be an energy crop.
Which is what they need in the fall and the winter.
Absolutely.
So.
Put that fat on.
Wow.
I was just curious about that because I remember hearing about it such a long time ago. And then when I looked it up, it might be something real beneficial. Maybe we'll get you to research, because you got the connections to everything in the world regarding, corn varieties and development of it. That just interested me. It was and the lysine is so essential to synthesizing protein that we eat. And I was just thinking, we have to get it. There's a bunch of other food sources we get it from, and I'm sure animals do too. But, if that was maybe that's a wildlife corn we could explore for people. It's even more beneficial. So.
Yeah, so as far as, there's so many different varieties to choose from of, hybrid corn, whatever. Is there anything off the top of your head you can think of that folks that, are, hunters, instead of farmers, would want to ask for? Like, is there something that has ears lower to the ground, or something that's going to be a little bit less prone to diseases? And are there just some old school varieties that farmers have been planting for years that would be good for hunters to plant over others? Does that make sense?
It would go back to more of a hybrid selection thing, I think, more than anything. You know, I'm less worried about traits. Again, I realize that for the most part, if you're planting in a wildlife food plot situation, generally you're planting it a little later than what would be considered optimum again. So you're planting it and want good stress tolerance. So whether it's our recommendations at Mississippi State, we have specific recommendations of commercial hybrids specifically for dryland production.
There you go.
And especially years like 2022 or this year where we have a lot of drought stress, that really, you can really make a lot, hybrid selection will make a huge difference in the actual productivity potential. And again, you know, the corn crop's not going to have a whole lot of value if something eats it up or it doesn't produce, so that it's producing grain during the middle of the year. So if it's not productive, it doesn't really matter where that ear is 2 foot off the ground or 4 foot off the ground.
Yep.
You've got to have something out there to work with. And that's essentially, you know, the bottom line. And my main recommendation would be pick something that is adapted for your region. Generally that means for southern areas, don't plant something that is ultra early maturity that was bred and adapted for northern Minnesota and parts of Canada, and bring that south and try to plant it, you know, July 1st in a short window, because it's not going to be adapted to the heat and climate of a dramatically different area of the United States. So consult with your local university recommendations and get some good recommendations, particularly for dryland recommendations, the productive hybrids.
So a lot of these, we hear about it over in the Delta, Toxie. You talk about it from time to time. Some of these guys that are really into planting stuff for their ducks Toxie, I've heard it called dirty corn.
Yep.
Is there a technique to be able to do that for ducks that a guy needs to know how to do this?
Well, dirty corn is I've worked with the wildlife biologists from the duck standpoint, and basically the dirt component of that corn is allowing other annual grass species that are native, whether it be barnyard grass, Japanese millet. There's a number of other grass species out there that are native in the region. You can use Roundup early in the year to kind of clean up, and it is important to try to maintain a relative weed-free environment for that corn crop during the early stages. But once it gets a foot tall or so, you could lay off the herbicide, not put out a pre-emergence grass herbicide, and allow that native weed species to come up and fill in the understory and provide some secondary grain production, you might say, food production for waterfowl species that they can utilize. And again, you know, that way if hogs or deer or coons come in and clean out your corn, you still have a secondary crop there to rely on that is frankly a little bit more reliable, you might say, and a little more foolproof. Again, getting back to Bobby's, you know, name about the, you know, intimidation factor corn, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with the corn crop during the year. And although it's a high reward crop, very high value, very desired by a lot of species, it's going to produce a lot more grain, but there's a lot more alternatives out there that are a lot more foolproof, you might say, that can provide value in the case that that corn crop doesn't come through or you have difficulties and challenges during the season.
Yeah, I would think too that the one thing for the duck farming guy doing it, I didn't do it, but I'm just talking from what experience I did have from it. You would want to plant, if you're going to do dirty corn, I think very early. And if the earlier it matures, also means a little more sunlight's getting down in there to let that barnyard grass and sprinkle top, whatever the species are, get a little sunlight. And honestly, you can disc something up in 1st of September in the south and get a few rains and grow a great stand of native seeds still. The best duck seeds and native more soil plants typically are the ones that prosper late in the summer, not early in the summer.
Well, Toxie loves barnyard grass.
Oh, it's just
It's amazing.
it saved my life, literally from a duck standpoint, so many times. And we have a fair enough. You're truly farming, it might be a pain, but we have a lot of it in the seed bank around here. So,
Lanny, you look like you might have a question.
Well, I think we've been hitting around this a lot and talking all the way around it, but I think defining your expectations on wildlife planning versus the agricultural production setting. I mean, can you help us understand what I know when I go out there and plant, mine's not going to look as good as the ag guys, but a reasonable expectation. I mean, can you expect half of the yield of a production farmer?
Generally so. Yeah. And a production farmer, is going to produce close to 200 bushels per acre generally. If you have irrigation, it's going to be higher. If it's dry land, it'll be less. That's a good general number for anywhere in the United States. In the drier regions or stressful regions, obviously that number is going to fall closer to 100 bushels an acre. But 50 to 100 bushels an acre of corn in a wildlife food plot setting would be considered normal and good expectations anyway.
yeah, so
And when I say bushels per acre, that's 56 pounds of grain produced per acre. So maybe you're all quick enough to do those numbers in your head.
Lanny is.
100 bushels an acre times 56 bushels, so over 5,000 pounds of feed per acre,
you
basically.
think about 50-pound bags of feed, so that's like, 55 bags
That's a
or
lot.
110 bags per acre of corn produced. That's a lot of groceries.
Yeah. And the top things you would advise for wildlife production. I know you kind of hinted around, and I don't want to answer it for you, but you mentioned some things that we should maybe deeper and more spacing.
Yeah, moderate plant population, pick a good corn hybrid, try to utilize a mechanical planter. It'd be nice to have a sprayer that you could utilize to apply either a burn down herbicide prior to planting to help clean up and prepare your field for planting, as well as to control weeds and insects during the course of the growing season, basically. And then fertilize it to meet expectations. Corn is a crop, again, it's a large crop. It requires more fertilizer than a short grass crop or a legume crop that's going to make its own nitrogen fertilizer.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation. Redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility, with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done. Making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
Moultrie was first in feeders since 1979 and is the leader in total game management. They're taking feeding to another level with the new Ranch Series line of durable and versatile feeders, perfect for both wildlife and domestic livestock. So Dudley, you can feed your goats. Whether you're a deer hunter, a hobby farmer, a land manager, or a rancher, Moultrie has you covered with several kit options, including a rotating auger, broadcast, or a gravity kit. And these feeders are 300 or 450 pounds. They're big feeders. All right, so guys, Moultrie is offering our listeners a 15% site-wide discount at MoultrieFeeders.com. Use code Mossy Oak with a capital M, Mossy Oak, at MoultrieFeeders.com and get that 15% discount. So we've kind of heard stories about some wildlife guys that are drilling corn into clover stands, and they're letting the clover produce nitrogen for them. Do you have any experience with that? And can you add to help us understand how that works?
Well, it's again, they're working a system there where they're growing clover. The clover's not going to mature until relatively late in the spring. They're letting the clover kind of die down naturally, and then planting the corn in there in late May, and utilizing the benefit from that legume crop, which is incorporating nitrogen fertilizer into the ground to provide a large source of nitrogen fertilizer for that corn crop. Now, the like any other wildlife corn plot that would be planted in late May, that exposes that to, the heat and drought of summer. So, the expectations are a little bit less, but you're basically supplying nitrogen fertilizer from an organic form where you don't have to worry about applying as much supplemental fertilizer that you would have to go purchase and have some type of equipment to go through the field and evenly spread it and distribute it and not burn the crap out of the corn crop during the growing season to optimize its potential.
Would it matter the type of clover? And for example, like Persian clovers and some of these, crimson clover and all, they'll bulk up a lot in the spring, but then in, say, May, they die down.
Yeah.
And they're nothing anymore, which is terrible for wildlife. But then a lot of the ladino clovers and white clovers, we tested some reds recently that are amazing. Even right now in this drought, they look great. Could they thrive in something that's a living crop, or does it need to kind of die down, like you said?
It's best for it to run its life expectancy and die down relatively early. So most of the crimson clover, Persian clover, even Balanza clover, and some of those that are going to play out sometime in May or even earlier would be optimal for that system where you're trying to plant corn early. Now, if you're talking about a little later crop, like sorghum, that would probably fit in better with the others. The other thing that I've seen, we've been working a lot with cover crops at Mississippi State as well, and that's a big push, I guess, in the agricultural community and everything as well from a soil benefit standpoint. Is some of the real late clovers like red clover, you'll basically have to terminate that at some point. If you plant corn into living clover, the corn basically is not going to come up, or if it's going to come up, it's going to get out-competed, and the legume or any other cover crop or wildlife food plot plant that you have out there is going to be extremely competitive with the corn. Right. So it's going to crowd it out basically where it's not going to be productive.
So it's kind of like the dance. You got to pick your partner carefully.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, when I think back though, and I think about Martin Drury and I think about the Lindsays and some of these guys that have some big fields. When you go to a place and you see there's standing corn left in it, and then there might be a few rows of soybeans, and then they'll have like a field of radishes or maximum or something like that. Those plots give you so much hope when you tiptoe up there. Yeah. You know something's going to happen. I mean, they're gorgeous, and they're attracting a lot of wildlife and nourishing and feeding a lot of wildlife. Mm-hmm. It's just, I think it's something everybody. We talk about having a toolbox and different tools, and if a guy can plant some corn on his place, it's something he ought to try.
Well, I think anybody, if you could just snap your fingers, what you'd want to have a big field in front of you in the fall, it's going to be corn that hadn't been harvested.
And there's no reason you can't, honestly. With a little bit of help from him and his advice and common sense, the big Debbie Downer for today that discourages everybody is more than anything hogs.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
and they've spread everywhere. And then an overpopulation of deer. Yeah. So I tell you the what's the right word? The antibiotic for this bacteria that is out there could very well be electric fences, because you could literally take and maybe a 2 or 3 acre cornfield in the middle of your place and protect it, right up until the time you want it to be available to them. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it is very discouraging in today's world. What deer and hogs. Raccoons, he said, are small on the field. Raccoons are terrible if you don't do something about them too.
Yeah. Mac, you got anything you need to add to this?
I have a question. If you say you have a 10-acre field in Oktibbeha County, are you planting soybeans or are you planting corn? Strictly for wildlife.
Is that a trick question?
That is a trick question.
There's some other things he might
be asking the corn specialist.
That's a loaded question as well. But if you're going to plant it for something you're going to hunt over, there's no doubt that corn is going to be a much more provide a hunt-friendly environment during the time period that most people would be interested. Obviously, soybeans are a very valuable crop for their summer forage value, but by hunting season, as a general rule, the grain and it's not going to provide the value that corn would or any other forage crop for the most part. That is we typically plant our winter forages, whether it's small grains or legumes for fall forage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not adopted the Bronson
technique
yet.
Depends.
Depends. Every time you kind of hang him up with something,
Bronson,
he's like,
AKA
well,
Dr. Depends.
Depends.
Well, why don't we, you get your trivia teed up? So, Jason, why don't you play the Sheffield music and we'll get this thing started.
All right.
Today's trivia is brought to you by Sheffield Financial. Explore swift, effortless, and convenient financing for power sports, outdoor power equipment, and trailers. Fueling your pursuits in hunting, fishing, and game keeping. More details at sheffieldfinancial.com.
All right, we want to thank our friends at Sheffield for helping us with this. We're going to ask you a trivia question. I think you've done this before. Maybe. You've been here. I can't remember if we asked you a trivia question. But I'm going to turn it over to Mac now. What's going on, Mac?
So the winner this week is Uncle Fuzz Varmint Removal.
Oh, wow.
And he won a Work
Varmint.
Sharp knife sharpener.
Is that the same thing from last week?
It is. That's
We got two of them.
we did. That's
All
a
right.
great one.
That is.
They're available at
Workshop
Tractor
stuff's great.
Supply. Eric, you ever had a dull knife? When you kill these great big Boone and Crockett deer, you gotta at some point
have
you gotta
some
cape them out. You gotta have a sharp knife.
I forgot my knife last year. That's probably why I killed the big deer.
Probably
And I
is.
tell you, this is an advanced one, but they make a little one you can slip in your pack. This is great too.
Sure is. Yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Mac.
All right, so y'all knocked out about 4 of my potential trivia questions throughout the podcast. So this one's kind of out of left field, so we'll give it a try. So using a corn to ethanol conversion,
We're getting political here.
how many gallons of ethanol come from a bushel of corn
Depends, right?
on average?
That's a
Do
tough
we have a
question.
window
It's,
that he can hit in?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If he's close, it's
It's about 3 gallons per bushel, I believe.
2.8. That's it
Boom,
right
he
there.
killed
Hey, he got it. He's a doctor. He's a learned doctor of corn.
So this is pretty interesting. All right, just listen to this. So each year, an acre of corn produces 551 gallons of ethanol, which is equivalent to 386 gallons of gas. Using the average miles per gallon of a U.S. automobile, that equates to 9,691 miles driven per acre of corn.
9,000
Mac's got a
per
little too
acre.
much
Yeah,
free
that's
time
pretty
on
good.
his hands.
Just think how much moonshine that would be. That'd be a lot of that too.
It's a lot of bags
Well,
of corn. too.
ethanol is moonshine.
That's exactly right.
So the moral of the story is, as you're driving to the beach, thank a farmer.
Yeah, there you go.
A lot of deer feeders filled up with the corn that's grown.
I wonder what that number is.
A lot.
A lot.
It is. It is. I tell you, it's been really interesting. Well, I'm gonna look around the room. What'd you learn, Lanny?
I learned that, as a wildlifer, you can plant corn and get some stuff out of it. Don't set your expectations like you're going to be like Seth down there in Knoxville County and, all those other kind of things at Southern Feed and Seed. But you can benefit your wildlife by planting some corn, so try it out.
Yeah. Toxie, you've been growing corn a long time. Did you learn anything out of this?
Oh, yeah. Anytime I'm around him, I learn more. But, it did teach me from a big picture standpoint. It's a lot like sitting here with Barry or Robbie or someone talking about fish pond management or all these things we address out there. If you're just, not me, and I'm not calling myself one of these an expert, but he is. Listen to the experts, and that's what they do, and go or try to go by the formula, by that sequence of, and it's not honestly that intimidating or difficult with corn. It's you can just make a bullet list of the few things to do. You can have any of this stuff. Now, the only caveat to some of it is what can take it away from you. And again, we talked about electric fences becoming more and more popular. But other than that, just going by the formula that someone provides, I mean, you can just about guarantee your results, given a little help from Mother Nature if you go by the formulas.
Dudley, what about you?
Get an old planter,
Yeah, if you see one on the side of the road, stop and ask.
Yeah, cut that lowest hole in the bucket out.
And 2 rows. 2 rows would be great.
2 rows.
4
You can
rows,
get
yeah.
3s now, 4 rows. I see them on eBay where people will buy an old, flex planter that's an 8 row and turn it into 4. Split it with your neighbors. It would pay off.
You could do a lot of cool stuff with that old planter too, besides just planting corn and stuff. But,
Oh, for sure.
yep.
I tell you what I learned, 1/4 of an inch means a lot.
It does mean
For
a
him to net 170 and 2/8, that's mighty close.
He's still
Bobby
obsessed.
can't get off of the
Never.
Mr. Trophy.
You squeaked over. So are you going to get a certificate and all that?
I got a certificate. I got a picture I can show you.
Oh, Bobby.
About that?
Bobby's turning green. I thought you had a sunburn, but now it's turning green.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Bobby.
Congratulations.
That's what it sounds like. Hey,
90% happy.
I'm so familiar with that tonation there in his voice because that's the same thing you hear when Lanny or someone comes up in the spring. Yeah, I stood on one's neck this morning out there. Oh, that's great. Yeah. That's awesome. That's great.
10%
Little different tone there.
I'm sure people are thinking the same thing about us getting rain, that didn't get rain.
10% happy, 90% jealous.
Well, I want you to know we did our very best not to make you laugh while you're sitting over there today because we knew it was hurting you every time you laughed with your broken ribs. So we made this one as mundane as possible. We did.
Well, it could have been that we just weren't funny too. So
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know about that because I think we can be pretty funny from time to time.
From
All right.
time to time.
Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up? Mac? It's time to start thinking about fall food plots.
It
They're
is
not that
time.
far away, so you
No,
need to
the
be
guys up
soil.
north will put them in the ground right now.
I was gonna say,
we're
we're gonna
shipping endurance
soil
radish
testing.
out every day.
Get that lime out.
Yeah,
And don't forget about your waterfowl.
yeah.
Yeah.
right now, I don't. For everybody knows how much I do. I don't even touch it until mid-July. It's just now starting time, and part of that is because everything can destroy it before the season ever gets
Right.
here. That's why, and you've still
Same
got
thing.
plenty of time on just about anything you plant for them. So, yeah, now's the high season.
I'll just go ahead and say this: it's hack and squirt time.
It is. We got to
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
It is.
So-
That is.
Soils are drying out, trees aren't moving as much sap upwards. So if you can handle the 90+ degree temperatures, you can get out there and kill a bunch of sweet gums and ashes and things.
Start at daylight.
Nice. Yeah, no doubt. Drink plenty of water.
Well, Dr. Erick Larson of Mississippi State University.
Big buck killer.
You probably know more about growing corn than anybody in the state, I would think.
Yep.
Wouldn't you agree with that?
Put yourself on that pedestal.
You got to be good.
He's not. He
gotta
is
be
definitely
good.
not an arrogant person. So, one thing we didn't, and this is an addendum, you can leave it out. But I mean, for the most part, the formula for growing wildlife grain sorghum or milo would be almost identical to growing a heirloom type corn, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The,
I
the,
thought
seed,
so.
the seeding rate's going to be a little higher.
Yeah.
There's a couple nuances. It likes warmer soil temperatures and so forth.
Start a little later.
And then you've got a number of different pests that can work on it. Mostly perching birds is a big issue.
Yeah.
But, otherwise its needs as far as would be very similar to corn.
Is there an aphid or something that gets in the sorghum when it starts making a head?
Yeah.
Is it called a midge?
Well, there's a number of different insects. We've had a novel one develop during the last 10 years. The sugarcane aphid is probably the one that you've heard of.
Wow.
It came out of literally sugarcane and adapted from a pest that was specific to sugarcane to sorghum and adapted and moved into the southern United States and actually moved up through the sorghum belt several years ago and made a dramatic impact on sorghum production all across the United States, basically.
I never knew we had a sorghum belt.
Yep.
Where is the sorghum belt?
Basically from southern Texas up through Kansas. Texas and Kansas are your main two sorghum states.
Yeah. How about
But-
that? Well, I learned something. I'm going
Look at you.
to remember that.
That's probably, for someone who's planting early July, that's probably a better choice than corn anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, when you get late, sorghum is a little shorter season than corn. It's much more heat tolerant. You have to watch the insects a little closer, I guess, but it's a more stable, more forgiving crop than what corn would be.
So if I've had it in the past and I see, it looks like I made a good seed head and it's matured, and so I kind of forget about it. And I go back and it's kind of looking black and doesn't have nothing inside the seed hole. Is that a fungus, you think?
It could be. It could be midge. Again, somebody mentioned midge when we were talking about the aphid situation.
Right.
You got a number of different things. Those midge basically lay eggs in the kernels when pollination occurs, only during bloom stage. So farmers will make a specific 1 or 2 insecticide applications at heading to head them off the pass, because they'll lay their eggs in the kernels and the worms will literally grow and hatch in the kernels and eat them from the inside out. So
Wow.
they can cause the blank head to occur later in the season.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I've seen that happen a number of times, though, and it looked like you were going to make it was going to make and be.
And then
real
nothing
pretty.
ate it, and
Yeah.
you know, especially when you didn't see a bunch of blackbirds and stuff on it, that's a dead giveaway. You didn't make much seed. So
Or there's a narrow time period where deer will absolutely slaughter it too.
Oh,
so
for sure, it's like ice cream to them. Just thought I'd bring that up for anybody interested in it. These same things don't be intimidated by either one, an heirloom corn or traditional milo grain sorghum crops either. It's not that difficult.
It really isn't.
And fun to grow. I mean, we should all experiment with trying these different crops in our food plots.
Yep.
It makes us a better food plotter.
Yeah, and I think it helps everybody just to understand how stuff works. And once it's explained and you understand it, it's it makes sense.
And you may find that sorghum may work better where you are, or corn may work. I've heard people tell me differently, but. My buddy Fred, he's had good luck with sorghum at his place and keeps doing it every year. And so may prefer corn or beans. You just got to find out for yourself.
Eric, you going back to Kansas this year?
Oh yeah, I try to make a trip every fall.
You know you're going to have a hard
And spring.
time topping.
There's
go out
Bobby.
there
Bobby's trying to find
Work
out
on those turkeys.
He's trying to get in your hip pocket.
He's trying to ride with you is what it is.
Sounds like he's got a good spot.
Bobby.
200-inch
Bobby.
typical. That's a big deer.
Bobby.
That's a giant. that is
I'm
not
gonna
a
leave it
big
alone.
Leave him alone.
I'm gonna
deer.
leave
That
it
is
alone.
a giant deer.
It is a giant deer.
really is.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's a lifetime
Definitely bigger
achievement
than
for sure.
Absolutely.
Hercules over there.
Yes, he is. Got a certificate to prove it.
That's
so.
right.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's about it. I want to remind everybody the television show is on now on the Outdoor
air.
Channel
That's
on
right.
Tuesday nights at 9 Eastern Time. Eric, be next week, tomorrow night. We need you to be watching that
9
show.
Eastern, 8 Central.
Critique it.
Yeah.
That's like the slot to be in.
It's a good time. The Lindsays are about an hour earlier.
Yeah.
We've been there for anchoring that from a very, very,
Very
long time.
long time. That's exactly
Before there was just about any hunting shows on it. I mean, it's a
Tuesday
long
night
time.
pursuits. That's
Yep.
right. It was a good
Sure
one.
did.
And don't forget, go to the website, sign up for the magazine. Got a new issue coming out soon.
Yeah, the fall issue will be first part of September. Will be rolling out.
Rolling on out.
Yep, and the LS tractor giveaway, guys.
Oh yeah, hurry up! It's not many days left.
Yeah, it's in the end of August, and they.
Look, what have you done with that thing?
I've been
hauling
some trees.
What?
I've been cutting some trees and hauling. So.
I need to run some pipe
Yeah, some more people
before we
need to
give that
use
away.
that.
I
Before
just
they
need
give
a
it
trailer
away.
to get it back.
Yeah,
so.
we're working on that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was something else I was going to say, Lanny, before you distracted me there.
Yep.
But there's still some LS camo tractors. So, guys, you can ask
really?
your local LS dealer, and they can probably get you one. So
Nice.
only a few of them left.
Better than Bottomland.
Eric, we enjoyed having you.
Yeah. It's
Sorry you're
Absolutely.
not feeling
Please
good.
come back.
No, I enjoyed it.
You got to be
Appreciate
careful
the
on those four-wheelers
invite.
now.
Yeah.
We don't need you to get hurt.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, like Lanny's got to say, you can't farm in flip-flops.
Yeah.
As I said to Cuz, we will have the corn guru on today.
That's what he is.
And
Yeah, he is.
he has a decent crop this year.
Yeah.
He's always keeping us posted. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, he had a bad year, and he was showing photos of the storms as they would just part
Split.
ways and go around. But
Yep.
it looks good this year.
I'm gonna give you the last word, Eric. You got anything to say? Even if it's Hale State, we won't beep you out.
I can't think of much, I guess, we didn't cover. Feel free to call us at any point, I guess. You know, you don't have to be an agricultural producer. You can find my name. You can find all our agricultural information on Mississippi Crops, Mississippi-crops.com. We do a Mississippi Crop Doctors podcast as well, so I'll plug that as well.
Look at that. Yeah, crop doctors.
Learn from the pros.
That's a good one.
The best. You know, I toot their horn all the time, but you can only be at the top or the best in a few different categories at a university. I mean, you just can't, no matter how heralded you are, but that's where we shine.
No doubt.
We have a lot of things, but especially shine in their area, and I'm really proud of them.
Go Dogs.
Yes, sir. Hell State.
Hell State.
Well, Eric, we appreciate you coming all the way over here. We always enjoy seeing you.
Yeah, we do.
And we'll do
Thank
this
you.
again.
There we go.
Thank y'all.
Why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Cleve.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.